Hello, good morning everyone. This is Ma'am Elaine and I'm back for lecture 4. So lecture 4 is entitled Sources of Historical Data. So this is where we will discuss the sources which the historians base their information, their knowledge sa ilahang pag-reconstruct about an event. So we're gonna talk about the kinds of sources, what are the main kinds and what are the kinds na under them, or what are the sources na under sa each kind, and what is a primary source, what is a secondary source, and what are their positive and negative pod na sides sa each na kinds of sources. So let's start. Historical data are sourced from artifacts that have been left by the past. So here, the word na artifact is generally used as a term which pertains about the things which is left behind by the past. This can be books, this can be materials, this can be relics. So artifacts diri, again, remember, this is used diri na time as a general term for all the things na left sa past. So artifacts can either be relics or remains, relics or remains, or testimonies of the witnesses to the past. Thus, historical sources are those materials from which the historian construct meaning. So again, artifacts are the materials used by historians in writing their work in reconstructing an event. So, a source is an object from the past or a testimony concerning the past on which historians depend to create their own depiction of the past. A historical work is the product of this recreation and thus the result of such depiction. So, that is the historical work again. The source provides evidence about the existence of an event, and the historical interpretation is an argument about the event. So again, the source is the evidence. It is the puzzle pieces of the whole. But these artifacts, these sources, does not speak for themselves. Books, knives, potsherds, coins, ngipon, ulo sa tao, does not explain for themselves. Dili na sila makastorya about sa event themselves. That is the part or the role of the historian. The historian is there to unsa tawag ani, to connect the source, to connect to connect the material, to explain the material in connection with the past event. Gets ra? Okay, so relics or remains are whose existence offer research a clue about the past. For example, the relics or remains of a historic settlement. So, kani siya na relics and remains, again, as I've said, they do not talk about the event themselves. For example, ayun nga, weapons, they do not talk about kanang the wars or the battles themselves. They need the historian to talk for them. So again, the responsibility of the historian, it is included to the responsibility of the historian to connect the source, to explain the source. Okay, so artifacts can be found where relics of human happenings can be found. For example, a potsherd, a coin, a ruin, a manuscript, a book, a portrait, a stamp, a piece of wreckage, a strand of hair, or other archaeological anthropological remains. So, a potsherd is a pot. Pwede na siya ginagamit na kanang imbakan ng pagkain. Some tribes would also use pots as burial na mga na pots. Then, it can be a coin. It can be a part of an ancient na building before. It can be a manuscript. It can be a book. Yes, it can be a portrait, a stamp, a piece of wreckage, a strand of hair, pwede ngipon, pwede bungo, pwede bones. So these are relics or remains. So what are testimonies? Testimonies can either be oral or written. So pag may testimonies, these are the kanang gipang storya sa isa ka tawo, which is part of the event, witness of the event. So this can either be oral, meaning gistorya lang, or this can be written. So this can be diaries, this can be documents, this can be records. So maybe may have been created to serve as records, or they might have been created for some other purposes. So all this describe an event such as the record of a property exchange, speeches, commentaries, records, voice records, audio records. This can be included in testimonies of the witnesses. So again, the historians has a main purpose in regards or in connection with the source. They have the responsibility to connect the source to three things: the becoming, the being, and the why and the how. So the historians need to connect the material na iyang nakuha, the source, to what happened before. And the process between the before ug unsay effects niya o nganong nag-lead man siya sa inani na situation karon. So, ang before is the becoming, ang karon the being, and the interpretations of the why and the how. So again, the historian has the responsibility to connect the source with the becoming, the being, and the explaining of how and the why. So there are two main kinds of sources. That's written and unwritten sources. So from the term itself pa lang, no? From the term itself, written is katong mga gipang sulat, katong naa sa papel, katong naa sa records, katong makita, mabasa. That is written sources. Non-written includes material and oral sources. So, under written sources na itulo, si narrative or literature, si diplomatic sources, and si social documents. So, narrative or literature are chronicles or tracts presented in a narrative form. Kani, dali ra kayo nini mo siya ma-distinguish na kind of document or source because it is in a narrative form. So, pwede siya na book. Pwede siya na document. Pwede siya na diaries. Yes, and most of the sources in history are nakanang makita nato, mas dali nato mabasa in libraries, are narrative or literature na sources. Yes, this can also be newspapers. So again, narrative or literature, this is in narrative na form na sources. Diplomatic sources are understood to be those which document record of an existing legal situation. So this is considered, diplomatic sources are considered the best and purest source because it is connected with the legal na policies of the government. Or this is a legal document with seal and authentication by the government. So unsa may included ani ma'am? Kanang naa sa Hall of Justice, kanang sa proceedings of a court, sa isa ka case, kanang naipirma sa judge, naipirma sa lawyer. Diplomatic sources can also be your land title, your birth certificate, your death certificate, your baptismal, isa pa, marriage certificate. Yes, diplomatic source na siya. And again, they are considered the purest and the best source because dili nimo na siya ma-fake manggod. Dili nimo siya ma-fake. Because dili man ka pwede maghimo og sarili nimo na birth certificate. Diba? Ang government ang nag-i-issue ana. Okay, social documents are documents, records of a certain department of the government. So this can either be economic, social, political, or judicial in significance. So ma'am, unsay difference sa diplomatic sources o social documents? Aniha, line title, diplomatic source. Pero pag moingon na ganita og list of the landowners in the Philippines, social document na siya. Birth certificate is a diplomatic source. Pero pag moingon na ganita og census, list of the families which resides in each of the barangays ni Iligan, that's social document. Social document pa na example, pila ka percent sa agriculture ni Iligan ang coconut. Pila ka tons of mais and corn ang gina-produce ni Iligan. Muna siya social document. So this can be government reports, municipal accounts, research findings, documents like these parliamentary procedures, civil registry, property registers, and records of census. So again, ayaw mo kalibog sa diplomatic ug social ha. So this 3 is under the written. Sa non-written sources, naa si material ug si oral. Here, si material evidence is the tangible. Kanang archaeological evidence na magunitan makita. So this can be pottery, jewelry, dwellings, graves, churches, roads, bridges, mga eskwelahan, mga hospital. These are the things, this is the material, the tangible things na magamit nimo or na ay historical significance. So these are material evidence. So also po, pwede po ni siya cemeteries again because naaman Japon good tayo makuha. Naay mga historical significance, historical significance si cemetery. For example, naay importante na tawo nagilubong aning adlaw dere. Secretly gilubong siya dere o mga inana. So this can also be ancient settlements. This can also be archaeological sites kung aha na hukay ang mga inani-inana. This can be roads or sewer lines. This can be big building structures. So these are historical sites. Oral evidence is also a very important source of information in history because in the modern na world, it is the most pinakadaghan because oral, no? Pwede ra ka mag-interview. Siya ang pinakadaghan because istorya magud siya gikan siya sa tawo ng mga buhi. So oral evidence. But the problem is siya pud ang pinakalisod i-validate. Why? Istorya manggod. And it is based on memories. And memories through time can change. Through time can naay makulang, naay madugang depende sa madunggan nimo sa uban. Oral evidence is pinakalisod jud na siya na i-validate because kung ang imong topic is, for example, about Marawi siege, and you will interview victims and witnesses about the Marawi siege, then oral evidence lang jud ka. Syempre, no? Oral evidence man jud ang tape recordings and interviews. Kinahanglan ka mag-interview og daghan tawo. Dili pwede na isa lang, duha lang, no. Kung naapat sa eskwelahan ka klase karon, you are expected to write a research paper about a local topics in inyong barangay. Mudawat na siguro kog mga 15 to 20 respondents. Pero atong college ko, in our thesis, we are expected to have 50 and above na respondents. Kaya nga naman, dili man gud pwede na piliun lang nimo ang iistorya sa imuhang source. And dili pud pwede na isa ra imong source, one-sided ra kaayo ka. No? Hindi pwede kay bias sa kayo. Okay, so this can also be tales, sagas, folk songs, or rituals, or kanang mga stories. Because syempre kani man gud ng mga stories, they have a grain of truth. Aha man din sila gikan. Pero ang problema lang gyud, no? Ang problema lang gyud sa mga inani again. Pag inani man gud imong source when you write about a historical event, it needs far more validation. Kinahanglan ka og material na evidence to prove that the folk songs, the rituals, and the sagas kay kuan siya tinuod. So even though na kay oral evidence, kinahanglan siya pud kag material evidence. So maunang ang katong kuan written sources and material kanang yung makita tangible, mao gid na sila ang kanang kuan, ang main. Pero again, important Japon kayo si oral evidence because if you want to write about a new topic na wala pa nakasulat before, syempre no. Kanang mugamit jud ka og ayo sa oral. Kay syempre nganong wala pa nakasulat before, kay wala pa documents. So kung walay documents, existing na documents, mag-rely jud ka sa oral evidences. Okay. So that's the written and non-written. Let's go with primary and secondary source. So what is the difference between the primary and secondary, ma'am? Na naghisgot na mataog non-written and written. Ang kani siya na kind of sources is based on the unsa ka duol ang source sa event itself. Okay, si primary source is original, first-hand account of an event or period that are usually written by witnesses during or close to the event period. So this example ani nila kay diaries, journals, letters, newspapers, and magazine articles. Factual account kanang based on kanang kanang kuan jud testimony sa naa dadto ana na time. So this included sa primary sources actually si kuan, si tape recordings, si diplomatic sources, yes, included na siya. Si census, si marriage certificate, si military na mga records, photographs, maps, postcards, posters, recorded or transcribed speeches. Transcribed meaning ka na bitang while na ay gastorya kay magsulat. That's transcription. Interviews of participants or witnesses, interviews, drawings, paintings, sculptures. These are primary sources. Kay mo yung primary sources, original sources. Pinakaduol sa event o period kung kano saan nahitabo ang imong topic. Secondary sources is most of the time writings na based on the primary sources. These are materials made by people long after the events being described had taken place. And most of the time, secondary sources analyzes and interprets primary sources. It is the interpretation of second-hand account of historical events. And examples of secondary sources are biographies, history, literary criticism, book reports, books written by third party about historical events. Third party meaning dili siya witness, wala po siya ato na time pero nagsulat siya about sa topic. So ayan, sources again is primary sources. This can be book reviews, newspaper or journal articles that interpret the primary sources. So ayaw mong kalibog ha. Primary sources are the original. Secondary sources is based on the primary sources. Okay. Unsay mas advantageous gamiton, ma'am? Pag moingon tag value o kung questionon pa ka primary sources jud. Mas ayos gamiton si primary source. Mas ayos na daghan kag primary source because it can validate jud your event. Meaning tinuod. And yun nga, you have primary sources. Ang problema lang ni primary sources is usahay, tungod kay interview siya, tungod kay isa lang siya ka-perspective, na yung mga times na kuan siya, kaya ng bias. Mauna na diri mo sulod ang kuan, ang pros or positive pod na side sa secondary source. Kung si primary source is ang pinakaduol sa event, pag inana manggod kay pwede manggod na ang primary sources is very biased sa ilahang experiences, sa ilahang mga na-feel. Sa secondary source manggod kay nag-offer siya og more wider na perspective. Nganong more wider man because it interprets several na manggod na primary sources. It looks at different na perspective and sides of the story. It does not really depend lang sa isa ka side kung kinsa ang luoy, kung kinsa ang nakadaog. But it interprets naman go the primary sources. It has analysis, it has conclusions. So primary and secondary. When you write or study about a historical event, dapat you have several sources. Okay. Do you have questions? Ayaw jud mo kalibog sa kind sa sources non-written, written. They are very basic. Pag moingon tag written nakasulat. Under sa written naa si narrative or literature which are in narrative form. Nasi diplomatic which is connected with the legal and the laws of the government. This includes the documents which are kanang makuha nimo sa government and with stamp and with validation. Social documents or records by the department of the government. This can be census, this can be the list of kinsay nabuhi ani na tuig. This can be the agricultural products, this can be economic na mga records. Okay, under the non-written, that's oral and the material. Okay, primary and secondary source. So if you have questions, please. Hello po. Yes. Black 1, sir, lot 3. Naa nakag-list, sir. Gawson tikasan. Sir?